Battleaxe. How and where to use, skills and builds, pros and cons. The Battleaxe is mainly suitable for solo activities, such as open world, solo dungeons, mists and Avalonian roads. Skills for Battleaxe. All Q abilities inflict bleeding on the enemy, which stacks up to 3 charges. If the enemy has 3 bleeding charges, their healing received is reduced by 12%. First Q Ranging Strike deals damage to the selected target. It can be used in PvE against bosses. Second Q Ranging Spin deals damage in a 5-meter radius around you. It can be used in PvE against mobs. Third Q Ranging Rage, universal skill for both PvE and PvP. The skill consists of 3 combos. The first 2 combos deal damage in front of you and apply a bleeding charge, while the third combo makes you leap forward, rooting enemies and dealing damage. The third combo doesn't apply bleeding charge. If you use only 2 combos, the cooldown of the skill will be 2.5 seconds. This means we can use the only first 2 combos to apply 3 bleeding charges as quick as possible. The third combo is used to finish off the enemy, or if they are trying to escape. If we compare all 3 Q skills in terms of the damage per second on a dummy, they all deal roughly the same DPS. Therefore, we conclude that the first 2 Q skills are inferior to the third one. The third Q allows us to apply 2 bleeding charges at once, while also providing some mobility and control. W skills. First W, Deadly Chop, deals high single target damage and reduces the target's resistance. It can be used in PvE against bosses. Second W, Adrenaline Boost, increases damage, movement speed and attack speed for up to 7 seconds. After activating the skill, you need to deal damage to any target, a rabbit, mob or enemy. Otherwise, the duration of Adrenaline will be halved. Adrenaline is mostly used against melee opponents, as the skill provides a damage bonus, making it easier to face roll. Additionally, the movement speed bonus allows you to chase or escape from enemies. Third W, Battle Rush, charge toward the target position, decreasing healing received of all enemies in a 5-meter radius and increases healing received of up to 5 allies. The buff doesn't apply to health potions. This skill provides mobility and is used against kite builds like frost, moss and fire staffs. Against kite builds we use the Battle Rush instead of Adrenaline because if you fail to deal damage, Adrenaline's duration will be halved, making it harder to catch high mobility enemies. Fourth W, Internal Bleeding, deals damage in a 6-meter radius and causes bleeding which deals damage if the target moves. Well, the use of this skill hasn't been figured out yet. It deals low damage and has a long cooldown. I think this skill needs a rework. Fifth W, Raging Blades, creates 2 axes around you that deals damage every half seconds in a 6-meter radius. Increases your damage by 4% for each enemy hit, up to 10 times. It can be used in PvE against mobs. In PvP, Adrenaline and Battle Rush are better option. E skill, Blood Bandit. The skill consists of 2 combos. First combo, you throw an axe that deals damage based on the number of bleeding charges. The more charges, the higher the damage. Second combo, you throw an egg that deals fixed damage and heals you based on the number of bleeding charges. The cooldown for E is 20 seconds. If you don't use the second combo, the cooldown is reduced to 10 seconds. From the passives we take the first one for additional damage every 4th auto attack, or the second one, which grants lifesteal on auto attacks. It's up to personal preferences. With the Adrenaline skill, which increases auto attack speed, these passives are extremely effective. The third passive increases damage resistance every 5th auto attack for 2 seconds. 2 seconds is very short, often this passive is not noticeable during combat. The fourth passive increases all damage by 8% every 4th auto attack for 3 seconds. It provides little damage, ends quickly and is difficult to utilize effectively. How to use combos, third Q and second W against melee opponents. It's better to start the fight by immediately throwing E at the opponent, gaining an early advantage in HP trading. Then there are few possible scenarios. If the opponent has equal or lower item power, you can play aggressively by activating Adrenaline and rushing at them to apply 3 stacks of bleeding, so that the next E deals maximum damage. Of course, if your HP drops, throw the second axe from E to get some HP. If the opponent has higher item power, you can try to kite them with E and constantly retreat until their HP drops to around half. Then try to engage with Adrenaline. However, this often doesn't work, as experienced opponents won't just chase you and take all your axes along the way. Third Q and first W against ranged opponents with high mobility. There are also 2 tactics. The first, play aggressively and try to catch up the high mobility opponent. The second strategy is to force the opponent to play by your rules. Instead of chasing them, kite them. Either the opponent won't want to fight you, or at some point they will use their mobility skill and then we turn around and start chasing them. If they manage to escape, we start retreating again, and so on until victory. Build for PvE. Here's a cheap option that's perfect for PvE in the Mist, solo dungeons, open world and Avalonian rows. The approximate cost of the optimal build is around 100k. Mage Cowl, Fire Breath. Skill deals periodic damage in a cone in front of you, which is great for farming. For the chest you can go with Assassin Jacket or Mercenary Jacket. Assassin Jacket makes you invisible for 7 seconds. It's useful for escaping if someone interrupts your farming. Mercenary Jacket gives you lifesteal whenever you deal damage. It makes farming mobs and bosses much easier. You can bring any boots. Mist Color to speed up your ability cooldowns. For consumables, Soup to increase your HP regeneration out of combat. An invisibility potion for safety. Build for the Mists. The axe has a lot of build variation, so I'll break down the most classic one that I often use. The starting cost is around 600k. You can choose between Hunter Hood or Fiend's Scowl. Hunter Hood Retaliate, increases your resistance and reflects 85% of incoming damage. Use it when a lot of damage is coming your way. Fiend's Scowl Purge, removes all buffs from the enemy. Use it to purge things like the opponent's Mercenary Jacket, boots and so on. For the chest, take Mercenary Jacket. Most of the time use the Bloodlust skill. Switch to Inferno Shield against high mobility builds like Frost Staffs. Inferno Shield increases your resistance for 8 seconds and reflects 38% of incoming damage. Any plate boots. For offhand, choose between Facebreaker or Muizak. Facebreaker increases your survivability and gives a bit of damage. Muizak increases your damage and provides a small healing bonus, which also boosts your survivability. Undead Cape that makes invisible when your health drops below 15%. Tetfar Cape or Avalonian Cape provide additional damage. For consumables, Rusted Mist Snapper and Healing Potion. With this build, it's very risky to fight opponents who can remove buffs, such as Daybreaker, Fist of Avalon, Mage Robe, Fiend's Scowl and Helmet of Valor. Against them, it will be very hard to make use of Mercenary Jacket and Hunter Hood. Build for Corrupted Dungeons. For Corrupted Dungeons you can use the same build as for the Mists, or try this one. Mage Cowl for extra damage. Mage Robe, Purge Shield, increases your resistance and removes all buffs from the enemy when they deal damage to you. Against kite build like Frost Staffs you can use Frost Shield, which increases your resistance and reflects 15% of incoming damage, also slightly slows the enemy when they hit you. Any plate boots. Torch increases attack speed and slightly speed up skill recovery. Avalonian Cape or Deadford Cape for additional damage. From consumables, Rusted Mist Snapper and Health Potion. All the pros is perfect for solo activities, it's not expensive and it's very easy to learn. One of the main advantages of Battleaxe is that you can play aggressively and kite your opponent. Of the cons, it has quite a few counters, and it's not suitable for group PvE. That's all, thanks for watching.